The light is fading, but engines are firing up in the pit lane as we get set for qualifying for the CrowdStrike 24 Hours of Spa. It is round 3 of Fanatec GT World Challenge Europe powered by AWS Endurance Cup. It is round 3 of Intercontinental GT Challenge powered by Pirelli. It also means that we have 70 cars ready to do battle for the biggest and best GT3 race of them all. David Addison and John Watson trackside. It's a busy pit lane, John, before the cars spill out onto a fantastic race circuit.
Well, it's going to be a very exciting session of 4 qualifyings, and let's have a quick look at the Spa-Francorchamps circuit as we go down through Pouhon and down to the lowest part of the circuit, up through the dreaded Blanchimont, one of the great corners here at Spa-Francorchamps. Just over 7 kilometres in length, 21 turns, and everyone is a challenge, and especially David now. The light is fading quickly, quicker than we had anticipated. It's now that everybody will be running under nighttime conditions, I'm assuming, because while the camera actually highlights the darkness, if you're standing in the pit lane or you're out on the racetrack, it's considerably darker than the images we're seeing on our screens.
Well, it's going to be a fascinating qualifying session, this, because if you are new to Fanatec GT, let's explain that you take the aggregate, the average, of your drivers. So if you're a 3-driver team, like the cars in the Pro category, then you take the average of the 3 times. If you're in the other classes, you take the average of the 4. So really you need everybody to be good, and we'll be talking about who is quickest within a session, but also that won't necessarily be how the grid is formed, because you could be fastest within your section of qualifying, but when you take the average into account, it could be a different story. And bear in mind as well, we're looking for the top 20 cars on the average to go into Superpole, which will be the highlight of tomorrow's activity on track. Last year's winner Jules Gounon getting ready to go there, number 33, which is the Bullet Racing Aston, Jeff Kingsley, Jacob Riegel, Romain Larue and Ruben Del Sart, the drivers. The fast lane is open. That means that the cars can make, as you see, their way down to the end of the pit lane and trying to get track position important. Jules Gounon with his yellow lenses, getting himself ready for the darkness, and I suspect that he may well go last. We'll see how the team elects to run this, but that's going to be a car that will be, of course, in just 3 of the 4 elements of qualifying. Same for this car, Augusto Farfus, Maxime Martin and Valentino Rossi at WRT in BMW number 46. 70 cars, finding a clear lap, finding 2 clear laps, finding any clear lappery is going to be very, very difficult indeed.
Well, that's really one of the problems, because the level of driving skill, experience, and whatever else is quite considerable. So you've got the pro cars with the professional paid drivers of the day, the best in the world in these cars, and then you go through the other categories. The biggest category, amazing, I didn't realize this, but the Bronze Cup is the biggest category here this weekend, but you've got Gold Cup, Silver Cup, Bronze Cup, Pro-Am Cup, cups galore, but the level of talent in those classes outside of the Pro is varied, and in some cases where you've got 4 drivers per car, it's very difficult to get 4 drivers that are equally matched. And it's amazing. It's a huge challenge for everybody in this 70-car field to get through these 4 qualifying sessions. And we have seen throughout the day, we had a pre-qualifying session earlier in the afternoon, and there were 3 red flags. Yeah. We've seen a GT4 pre-qualifying session this evening. That was also a red flag. So there's a lot of work going on. What's going on Valentino Rossi's car?
Well, you wouldn't expect this to be happening at the very start of the session, would you? So something is amiss. One of those red flags that John's just touched on came towards the very end. Kenny Hubble went off at Eau Rouge, apparently, according to the team, driver error, but the force has done quite a bit of damage to the car. Also, it's completely ruined the steering wheel. Kenny has gone to hospital just for precautionary checks, but the team, the Sun Energy One team, have been left with quite a lot of work to do to get that car match fit for the rest of the weekend. And we send Kenny our best wishes and hope that he's going to be back to full health tomorrow when he's back at the circuit, we hope. Whether that car would have got into the top 20 for Superpole, you can discuss. I suspect it might have done, but anyway, we're not going to see it in qualifying. Clement Mathieu on track in the charismatic Hexis liveried Porsche. those of you with long memories might remember Hexis McLarens and Aston Martins even going back further than that in the very early GT3 and then FIA GT1 World Championship days. But the Hexis colour scheme adorns the number 44 Porsche, and that car pounding its way up through Blanchimont now. Then Clément Mathieu, Hugo Chevalier, Stephen Palette and Porsche factory driver Frédéric Makovicky making it a very interesting lineup.
Yeah, Fred Makovicky, of course, we see him elsewhere these days. Still a member of the Porsche family and a very valuable member too. So Fred, with that inimitable, very happy-looking face every time he smiles. So it'll be interesting to see what Makovicky will do when he gets his turn behind the wheel.
Now bear in mind that this is only a 15-minute segment, so keep making the point, it's a long lap. You don't get many laps in. In pre-qualifying, the best anybody did was a 2:17.9. It was a Porsche, interestingly enough. So let's just follow Clément Mathieu. Let's have a look at Spa. Let's have a look at the Porsche. Let's see how this lap pieces together.
So through Eau Rouge and Crest over the top of Raidillon, all looks neat, tidy, and most importantly, comfortable. So the long climb up the Kemmel straight, it is an incline, and that allows you, as you get into the braking zone, to brake that a little bit later than you would do if you're on the straight and level. And we see a purple sector time, and that's just been eclipsed in the length of time. Another car behind the 44 Porsche has gone that little bit quicker. Just looking to see who that might be. Crestani, I think, in one of the Lamborghinis. So anyway, following the Porsche down through Bruxelles, then the drop down into Speaker's Corner or Jackie Eakes Curve or whatever number of names this corner's. Caught out a couple of people here again in that pre-qualifying session, going off into the gravel, in some cases dragging gravel back onto the circuit, which caused those following then have a few moments. Here this is my favourite corner on the racetrack, Pujol, because you always feel that you could go into the corner that little bit quicker than you've done. There's a little thing inside that ticks in your head and says, no, I've got to lift off. I want to go faster, but I just can't bring myself to do it. So now you exit out of Pujol, down into Flip-Flap, into Fagnes, as that's known to me. Well, now Fagnes gone through that. He's now up into Paul Frere Cobe. Again, a corner with a late exit. You run the curve, but don't overrun it. Track limits are being penalised, and they're being noted virtually every lap. We're getting notifications. Now, the first part of Blanchimont, absolutely flat out. But here's the real tester. You need a car to be with you as you go through there. In this context, with your new rubber, it ought to be flat. Certainly for the pro drivers, it will be flat. So we're seeing what Mathieu is going to do, coming up to the conclusion through the chicane, as you pointed out earlier, David. Bus stop has been deleted, it's just chicane. Comes across the start-finish line, and the lap 2:23.264, that will be significantly improved upon as we go through the next three sessions.
Number 7, Brendan Aribe, has had a puncture on his outlap, so he's had to come back in, and they've used a Joker tyre because you're limited on how many sets you get for the weekend. So drama for Brendan Aribe with an early puncture in this session. 79 Mercedes going through. That's the Arjun Maini, Sebastian Bode, Hubert Haupt, Jordan Love car. Hubert Haupt, sort of player-manager, if you like, of that team. Sebastian Bode is behind the wheel of it, the 2020 Ligier European Series champion. So we've already eaten into the first third of the session, and it is, well, I was going to say Baptiste Moulin who is the fastest, but that would be a lie now because Jeffrey Schmidt has gone quicker in the Sky Tempesta McLaren. Then Fabrizio Crestani, 2:18.4, goes quicker than anybody else by 1.9 seconds.
And that's a good lap of 1:18.4. I mean, that's about just under half a second slower than the very fastest lap we've seen over today and over even the bronze running earlier in the week. As we look at Alex Malikin comes, that's not Malikin, that's the Porsche, it's Batard. I'm looking at the purple, the 911. So what is Malikin going to do? He's purple sector 1, green spinner, and whereabouts, and they're trying to watch to see where that part of the track it is.
I think that's coming out of Eau Rouge, isn't it, at pit out?
I'm just having a look to see around the 7-kilometre racetrack. So Batard comes through and comes across start-finish line. He records 2:20.865 as there is Malikin in the 911. So he's going to go, and will he challenge the current quickest lap of Crestani to 18.4, to 18.9, just under half a second away from the Lamborghini, which has got the quickest time.
So that spinner, 216, 216, the Porsche, I think, has not yet got going. That's the Modena Motorsport. You might expect them to run Ferraris, but Porsche is the car. The Francis Tiger, John Shen owned team. Benny Simmons and Matthias Besch share that car. So the yellow flag still being shown within sector 1 as we go on board now with number 93. This is Jeffrey Schmidt for Sky Tempesta, and it's busy up the road, look.
And that's going to be always the issue when you've got a brief qualifying session. He's backed out of it. You can hear there's flashing lights. Is that a red flag? It is a red flag.
Yeah.
And there is the reason why that car's been stuck there.
He's hit the barrier, look,
yes.
There's debris. Yeah, he's lost it coming out of Eau Rouge. That's the pit exit lane.
Clock has stopped.
Yeah.
But we've only got just under 8 minutes of this session to go, so everybody's got to come back into the pit lane, get the car removed to safety, and then go back out again, do an out lap. And they're still working on that 46 Valentino Rossi. That's a strange issue. They've got a problem so late.
It is, but equally they're not losing anything because the car wouldn't have been out in this session anyway.
Right,
so they've kind of bought themselves 15 minutes of extra
Yeah.
time. But you're right, it's interesting to see.
I would have thought that, yes, I thought all they'd have been doing now is giving the car a nice little chamois over and a bit of spit and polish.
Just to make the point again that the 3 driver cars only go out in Q2, 3 and 4, as I was saying earlier, so that's why they've got themselves that extra 15 minutes worth of time. So the car wouldn't have been out in that session, but it is unusual to find the teams working so feverishly. There you can see 92, which is the Kevin Estre, Lawrence Vanthoor and Julien Andlauer Porsche, which is another of the 3 driver cars. That's therefore yet to go, the Manthey Grello Porsche. Grello, if you're wondering, green-yellow. Into the pit lane comes the Grassa Racing Team Lamborghini. So yes, as John rightly says, the clock has stopped because it is qualifying. So far, this is the car with the CrowdStrike fastest lap of the session. The GLT Grassa Racing Team Lamborghini, Fabrizio Crestani, having done that time aboard number 58. And Fabrizio Crestani, very experienced single-seater racer in Formula 3 and GP2 before he came into GT racing and sports car racing, the man behind the wheel of it. So you've got, at the moment, Lamborghini from Audi, Thomas Laurent for the Butson VDS team ahead of Porsche, the pure racing Alex Malikin car, and there Francis Tiger surveys the damage at the front of the Modena Motorsports Porsche. The race director, if you're thinking, well, you know, the car had been parked, what was going on, the race director will give the drivers time to sort of go through the cycle. It's not as easy as just turning a key in your road car. If you stall one of these, there's a sort of 30-second period to let everything power down and then try to restart it. If at the end of that the car isn't moving, then okay, the race director knows that something else has to happen. But race directors will give them time, give the driver time to try and sort it out. There's the luge coming up the hill, and there's contact behind the trees, bang into the tyres, front and back contact, in fact.
Yes, that all began on the run up towards Raidillon. I suspect coming through Eau Rouge, the car was maybe a little wide, it got onto a bit of loose rubber or whatever, but the back end of the car came out of the top of Raidillon. It should have been the front of the car came out first, it was the back in this case. And once that situation is developed, you're just sitting there as a passenger and waiting for it all to come to a stop, whether it comes to stop quickly, slowly, or whichever. But anyway, that car has now got to be removed, and it's going to take another moment or two to do so, as the clock has stopped, the clock for this session. But of course, by the minute, David, it's getting darker and darker.
It is, and cooler, you could argue as well. The temperature's dropping, so for the last driver, when the car is lighter and the air perhaps helps to extract yet more speed out of the car. What can you do in 8 minutes? Well, there is time to do a proper lap time, maybe even 2, so it's worth getting ready and going out.
Oh, absolutely, everybody's got to be prepared to go out. But of course, if everybody goes out at the same time, you're going to have, what, 68 or so cars, beg your pardon, 20 or 30 cars on the track. It's always going to be a busy track, and inevitably, you often say this, red flags breed red flags, whether there's 7 minutes or 8 minutes, whatever left. So everybody needs to think about it, and when they do go out, remember, you've still got just under 8 minutes to get your time done. You only need that one clear flying lap to get that time in. And sometimes patience is a virtue that is rewarded by a good time.
Dorian Pam in the Iron Dames Lamborghini. Of course, they were the Gold Cup winners last year in a Ferrari. This year, the Iron Dames and indeed Iron Lynx switching to Lamborghini. You saw a moment ago, 132, the GMG Racing by Car Collection Porsche, the American entry. That is the Manthey Porsche I was talking about earlier on. That's got to be a potential outright winner, hasn't it? Especially if we have some rain, because Porsches tend to go pretty well in the wet. And the rain, I understand from Gemma Scott in the pit lane, has now started. So, yeah,
you can see it, yes.
See it there. Oh, well, this is going to throw things completely.
Oh.
All of a sudden, those drivers that have done a lap time have got a banker, and it's a very important banker, because if the rain sets in, and the forecast is that it's going to be heavy showers this evening, no one's going to get near a 218. And this is going to throw the grid upside down. It's going to throw Superpole into a really interesting situation. Only Spa does this.
There's the Porsche. You can see the damage to, well, certainly the left front looks to have been whacked. There was a bronze test here on Tuesday, and I wasn't here on Tuesday, but I understand it may have been wet. So some of these drivers will have had experience in wet conditions on the racetrack, but others may not. And there you can see the Family Grove Porsche, and looking, well, that's not a Waltzing Matilda on the back wing, is it?
Skippy, isn't it?
This is Skippy.
Yeah, looking pretty aggressive.
Yeah, it is. It is Skippy. Yeah.
Skippy packing a punch.
Yes, indeed.
Stephen Grove, Dad, is in the car. That's 911 of Alex Malikin. That was very, very good in the pre-qualifying session. And again, you'll notice that we've got the two pit lanes, as ever, at Spa for the 24 hours, added together to make one very, very long pit lane. So some are in the top pits, the F1 pits. These are in the Heritage or Endurance pits down at the bottom, which always makes one feel life is more difficult. The garages always feel that bit more narrow, and of course you're on the slope, but some teams prefer it.
David, those garages on the return leg have been there since, well, I don't know how. I mean, Spa has been a racetrack since the middle 30s, if not before that.
Yeah.
And I mean, that was the pit lane, that as it was over many, many seasons.
Well, one of the local heroes, Maxime Martin, and we can hear from him because Maxime is with Gemma Scott.
Maxime, just looking at the timing board there, the rain started falling. This is going to get really interesting, right?
Yeah, definitely. You know, when we drove only in the dry, now qualifying half dark, half wet. It's going to be interesting, but at the end it's the same for everyone. So we just have to push and see where we are.
And for the guys that have already set a time, does that give them any kind of...
Quite a big advantage. So it's going to be interesting. I don't know how it works exactly, but for sure now with the lap times they did, if it's raining now, you will have a lot of silver and Pro-Am cars in the front.
Yeah, very interesting. Thank you very much, Maxime.
Thank you.
So he just shrugs and gets on with life because Maxime Martin knows exactly what the Belgian conditions are like. Of course, his father and his uncle, winners of the event, and Maxime Martin himself, after many years of trying, managed to win it in 2016. That rain is getting heavier, and it's going to be a very different track surface now for the cars.
And there's the potential with this rain beginning to fall midway through the session with times established by, well, certainly there's a dozen cars that have done a strong lap time. We could have a very unusual Superpole on Saturday evening, Friday evening.
Yeah, absolutely. Right, the CrowdStrike boss himself, George Kurtz, goes on track. Now, of course, what nobody knows, because they've only just gone back onto the circuit, is what the track surface is like corner to corner. And George Kurtz, I think, was first out. He's the pioneer, really. He's going to find out exactly what it is like now and whether it's worth persevering on slicks. Klaus Bachler, in the meantime, is in the pit lane, and he's with Amanda Busick.
Klaus Bachler telling me that the Porsche's probably done for this first session. It's starting to rain here, picking up significantly on pit lane. Klaus, as you look ahead to what your stint's going to look like, how does this change your effort?
Yeah, I mean, Alex did a really good job. He managed to do everything in the first lap, then the red flag came, so we were on our second lap. From the previous sessions, we saw that lap 1 is the lap where we need to be, where everything has to be perfect. And now it starts to rain. I mean, this is Spa. You can expect everything here in this region. So let's see. I mean, we have not driven in rain here this whole weekend. We drove a little bit at the tests, which was a month ago. So yeah, it will be interesting qualifying.
Good luck.
Thank you.
So now the drivers that have been out have decided whether it's slicks weather or wet.
I mean, obviously, I'm assuming that Mercedes were saying coming in the pit lane and others may have gone out on a set of slick tyres. And you can see, just arrived, just getting caught out. So they're having to come back in again, and they're going to have to go on to a set of wets. There's no intermediate Pirelli tyre, so the track is getting wetter. There's a roll of the dice that you could maybe get one lap in on the slick tire before it became the transition point to the wet weather tire. So these are really, really trying conditions for the entire field in this first of 4 qualifying sessions.
I mean, the cars that it's going to hurt the most, in a way, are the overall cars, because they will not have a dry time at all. All their lap times, potentially, if this is set in for the night, are going to be in the wet.
And it creates, as I mentioned just a minute ago, this unusual situation where Superpole on Friday evening may not be the usual suspects, but it'll be those that went out in F at qualifying 1 and got a lap time in. And I think certainly the first dozen cars, the slowest time of the first dozen cars is a 2:20, and that's going to be very strong in terms of what's going to happen by the time we get through the next 3 qualifying sessions.
So there is the 911 Porsche, as we've been hearing, is done for this session, but the team now getting set ready for Q2. So wet tyres, Pirellis of course for everybody. You see the bronze legend at the back, just to indicate which class the car is in. Number 16 Audi down the pit road, and driver change getting ready for the second session. This is the Uno Racing, the first all Chinese-Japanese squad in the 24 hours. Adderley Fong, Zhao Ole He and Pan Junlin with the pseudonymed Rio. Makar Chun, to give him his full title, but Rio is the name under which the Super Sprint Challenge champion runs, and a number of those drivers here for the first time. We've got quite a number of Spa rookies, and hardly the ideal conditions in which to learn the circuit.
I mean, I've been coming to this race for a decade or more, and it appears to me, looking at the entry, that there are more first-timers here this year than I remember in all the years I've been coming.
So Fabrizio Crestani goes back out, and we'll see here how the track surface stands up. This car, as I say, running in the Silver Cup, of which he's obviously the fastest, sharing it with Gerhard Tveraza, Lamborghini Super Trofeo racer, the Australian driver Ricky Capo, and Sam Neary, very rapid young driver in British GT. So it's an interesting combination of pedallers in this, and all of them are quick. So it's a Silver Cup class winner potentially, but what can it do overall?
It's difficult to tell, but bits of the racetrack look to be less wet than other bits. Now, coming down here through Fania, I would say, looking at those images, it's not a dry track, but it's not as bad as it looked 5 minutes ago.
I'd agree with that, yeah. So again, this is teasing the teams, isn't it? Because just when you think, okay, it's going to be wet, then it starts dry. I mean, that looks dry, that section.
Yeah, I mean, I checked the wiper. I thought I saw the wiper moving, but that might just be to clear the screen from a residue of the wiper is in operation. But the racetrack here, from the images we have on screen, doesn't look to be the wet track that we thought we were going to get, say, 5 minutes ago.
Which, again, gives a bit of optimism to those teams that need to do something. Not everybody is out. In fact, the circuit is very, very quiet in terms of the number of cars circulating. Many, I think, have decided to call it a session. It's probably wetter by the look of it over here than it is at the far end.
It's the return leg up to Blanchimont, but particularly coming into the chicane, pit straight. I mean, I can't see any spray coming from the rear of a car. When you see the spray, the balls of spray behind, then you know the track is wet, but there's nothing specifically bad looking. So maybe it's just that little section, the last sort of eighth of the lap down the hill. And I mean, that's as hard as you can go down the hill. Clearly, got to be cautious going through Eau Rouge and then the transition, because the car gets a little bit light on its wheels as it crests Radio, and then you don't want to get onto the painted curbs if they are wet, because that usually is a signal of a moment you wouldn't want to have.
So down through Pont there in the Barwell Lamborghini. This is the view on board with Bashar Mardini. So this is the Barwell Lamborghini then, which is currently 10th in the times, and it's a Pro-Am class car. Let's have a look at the track surface here, John.
I mean, again, it's difficult to see it because you're looking at the shades of grey at different parts of the racetrack. But to me, it's probably very, very close here to whether you'd run a slick tire or you throw a set of wet weather tires on, but it's not really wet enough for the wet weather tire to do the job it's designed to do. It likes to have lane to grab hold of. That's what makes the rain tire so good. So up the hill, coming through the first part of Blanchimont. So David just pointing out to me that Q1, where did it go? That last just under 8 minutes is over.
Checkered flag is out. Up the curve goes Mardini. He had an off in the bronze test earlier on in the week, but keeping out of strife here. It's the chicane, slightly uphill. Stays out to finish the lap. It's an argument to say that being out on a wet road is worth it for the AMS because they're gaining experience.
Absolutely. I mean, even though it's not going to make a difference to the lap times overall in Q1, it's experience. And I mean, we had a unique situation at Spa 1 year ago. We had 4 days in which there was no rain. A dry Spa 24. Well, we're not going to see a dry Spa 24 this year because now the rain has begun. It might be sort of faltering a little bit. But again, in the space of a lap, there is spray beginning to come from the rear of the Lamborghini. So every lap is an adventure. When you come down into Eau Rouge and over Radio, 1 lap ago, you had a set of conditions which you thought, well, that maybe I can push harder this time. You come down this time, pushing that a little bit harder. Oh, I shouldn't have pushed.
Yeah.
You can't win. You just can't win.
Now there, sitting in the pit lane ready for Q2 to get underway, is another potential winning car. Rutronic, very successful team nowadays in the new style of DTM, has Thomas Preining, Laurin Heinrich and Dennis Olsen. Dennis Olsen, 2019 IGTC champion. Laurin Heinrich, the reigning Carrera Cup Germany champion. Thomas Preining, DTM championship leader this year. So they are all very, very accomplished drivers. They all know Porsches inside out, and that again could be a car to beat. Acodis ASP team, we know how good that squad is, and again in the endurance pits. Right, let's have a look at the highlights then of Q1, interrupted as we saw by the errant number 216 Porsche, Francis Tiescher having that spin, but the car's heading out onto a dry road to begin with, and then spots of rain started to fall. The Comme-Ledegar team, Hexis Porsche of Clément Mathieu, the first one to set the pace. The first one to find the wall, though, was this Porsche of Francis Tiescher, the modern motorsports car, bringing out a red flag. Dorian Pan back on track for Iron Dames. And aboard 93 McLaren was Jeffrey Schmidt. The rain still falling, and that meant that 1 or 2 of the drivers had to be ultra cautious as they tiptoed their way out of La Source. But it was patchy rain, as in it was wetter at certain parts of the circuit than elsewhere. It wasn't wet overall, as Alex Malikin came out of the chicane. And Fabrizio Crestani, the man then who was the fastest. In the end, Thomas Laurent was only 58 thousandths of a second slower, but it is Fabrizio Crestani who sets the target time then. 2:18.487 is the time to beat. But although that's of interest, it is, of course, the average that we're now looking at. It's easy in Q1 because you've only got that one time. That's the order. But from here on in, it will become the average. So we'll be talking about who is quickest within the session, but also how that affects the overall situation. Crestani quicker than Laurent. Malikin third from Loris Cabiru. Dorian Pan fifth, fastest at the end of Q1. And sixth, Lilou Wadou. Seventh, James Kell, ahead of Jeffrey Schmidt, Baptiste Moulin and Bachar Mardini, rounding out the top 10. Owen Bastard, the reigning GT4 European champion, outpacing Sam Dehaan and Ralph Bowen. 14th was Louis Pret from Florian Scholze and Antares Au. Sebastian Bode was 17th. CrowdStrike boss George Kurtz, 18th from Ivan Jacoma and Clément Mathieu. Samantha Tan, 21st, ahead of Lars Bergstein, and then Erwin Creed. André Mukovoz was 24th from Julien Piguet, and then Junlin Pan from Francis Tiescher, who despite the spin was still 27th, just ahead of the Parker Porsche of Derek Pearce. Sam de Jong was 29th, and Navin Rao in the Mercedes that was off the road in the pre-qualifying session 30th. 31st, Adalberto Baptista from Stephen Grove and Carl Washington. Yot Roponge was 34th from Rima Jafari. The Saudi Arabian lady racer Philip Saga from Jeff Kingsley from Gerhard Watzinger. Number 7, I think I'd said Brendan Reeve had a puncture, never got back out again, and Magnus Gustafsson missing out on a time as well. But now the circuit is going to get busy because not only do we send them back out, we unleash the pros.
Indeed, so we've got another 30 cars going to join in. There was, 36, 37 cars in Q1. That's been effectively doubled. And just how are you going to manage, if you struggle with 30 cars, how are you going to manage with double that number? Now that's an interesting move by the Ferrari F Corsa team. A set of slick tyres all set to go if that's what the driver feels he wants to use.
So Fabrizio Crestani, the driver that's quickest, and let's hear from him. It was a mega effort. He's fastest so far.
Well, that was a challenging session that we had there, but you did the right thing. The objective, right, was to get out and set the fastest time early on, knowing the weather was coming.
Yeah, I mean, the weather is coming, also the red flag can come. And yeah, the key was to set the time immediately. First lap, 95%, looking after track limits. And this is what I did, and it worked out in the end. Then we had the red flag, and then the ray cam. So yeah, that was good.
How tricky is it out there at the moment? How difficult are the conditions, and how wet is the circuit throughout?
I actually stayed out to check the track condition for my mates, and the middle sector was quite okay, like 2.5 seconds lower from dry. But the tricky part is bus stop and first corner, especially on the braking, and Eau Rouge and Blanchimont for sure. You have to guess sometimes. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
No worries. Thank you.
Gemma Scott with Fabrizio Crestani. Good effort to be the fastest. So the fast lane is open, and Q2 is about to get underway here as the countdown continues, and we are moments away from getting the second session underway. And there's a bit of a sheen on the track surface now.
I get a suspicion that everybody's feeling very tense, very nervous, because the track conditions are neither full wet, neither full dry. We saw the AF Corsa Ferrari team put a set of slicks out, offer them up to the car, but not quite put them on. Then they rushed back and put them in the back of the garage. We don't know what set of tires they put on. And whatever you do, it's literally a gamble. Nobody knows what track conditions are like. Since the first qualifying session concluded, well, there we are. They've got the slicks back, but are they going to go on, or are they going to make that? Yes,
they're going on. Yeah,
they're going to take the gamble. So this is a gamble that could be smartest move of this session, or one that they'll regret. And there's nothing going to be in between.
Alessio Rovera is the driver that's going to be given the duties of getting those tyres up to temperature. If enough warmth goes into a slick, it will work through a limited amount of rain on the racetrack. So the Italian endurance champion, World Endurance GTE champion, is behind the wheel of the car. We've got an Audi there that's reluctant to join in, but I think that's also partly because it's waiting to find a gap in the fast lane. So the team at Orange One attempt to get it going now, and it blasts down the pit road, Audi number 11. So it's ready to join the session with, that's Christopher Haasel at the wheel, isn't it?
So the field is literally, you can see them making the way from the pit lane exit. This is a very long pit lane that exits up just beyond the top of Radio, and already by the time you get onto the racetrack, you're doing probably the best sort of 200 kilometers per hour as the BMW makes its way out as well. So further around the circuit, this is into Pujol. Two Porsche going through. Interesting, Fabrizio Crestani, he did the clever thing by going back out again to help his teammates, rather than sitting back and saying, well, we're third quickest, done my job for the evening. They got the information which will be valuable. Now, whether it'll at the end of the 4 sessions bear any real fruit or not is a question that we won't know until we get to the conclusion of Q4.
You'll see how busy it is, pockets of cars running together, and this is exactly how it's going to be during the race, with so much traffic, with the light fading, the conditions, well, who knows what the race has in store for us. 2 days away from that even getting underway yet, as here towards the chicane comes 88. So Raffaele Marciello has been put in the car first. Out of the chicane he powers, and now up towards the timing line onto a flying lap.
Would the team have done that because they are looking at weather and saying this is the best of what we've got for these remaining 3 sessions, and therefore put Marciello in? We know he's a great qualifier, we know how quick he is. Is this, again, you can see that little flick of spray coming up now, it's getting greater. So I would assume that Marciello is not on a set of slicks, unless further around the racetrack conditions are much better. But there's enough spray coming from the rear of the Mercedes to think if it's like that around the rest of the racetrack, you've got to get onto a set of wet weather tyres.
We understand he is on wet tyres, just to confirm that. So the answer to the question, you know, is that a decision made on the conditions? No, because you have to nominate who is going to be driver 1, 2, 3 and 4 for the different bits of qualifying earlier on in the weekend.
Indeed.
So it's kind of coincidence, if you like, that Marcello is in now with these conditions as they are.
Well, maybe they've got a very good long-term weather forecaster in their Kodas Mercedes team.
Mystic Meg or somebody, yeah.
Oh, well, why not?
So Raffaele Marciello coming out of Bruxelles down towards Speaker's Corner. You see that little cut through on the left, which is for the motorbikes, and he's up the curb, but that's fine. 2 wheels on the curb, 2 on the racetrack. That's all good, and he's done an absolute best in the first sector, as he would in a sense, because he's really the first person on a flying lap. He's the first person to really push, but he's got the confidence to attack early, hasn't he?
He has, and the other factor is that's working in his favour on this first flying lap. I don't see any traffic directly ahead of him that's going to interfere with the momentum that he's building up, and you can see coming through Fagnes, he's able to lean. I mean, this is the drier bit of the racetrack from what Costani told us a few minutes ago, and it looks like there's still rain, but it's not as severe as it would be at the high end of the circuit up at La Source, and then the run down into Eau and Radio. And Raffaele Marciello, well, he's not got a purple in Sector 2, he's got a green. So other cars out there are pushing extremely hard as well.
Absolutely so. Right, let's see what he can do come the end of the lap then, as Raffaele Marciello heads up towards the timing line. Remember, a 2:18.4 was the best that we had out of anybody within the first part of the session. So then now down to the chicane comes Raffaele Marciello, goes through the chicane, and let's see what he can do. Up towards the line. It's going to be much, much slower than a dry Q1 time, but a 2:28 is your target, so 10 seconds lost in these conditions.
Maro Engel following was one driver who could potentially challenge the time that Marciello has set, so 2:28.29, so he has gone third. So in fact it's not, it's Marciello, Engel, and then looking to see the 91 Porsche in third place. And now Marvin Kirchhofer, the first of the McLarens, has popped up, the 159 McLaren, into second place, so changing literally as cars are coming across start finish line, but still Marciello, who's got virtually 0.8 of a second advantage over the rest of the field.
And there's bodywork lying on the road at La Source. Now that hasn't just been blown there by the wind, has it? So is there a car up against, no, can't see a car against the barrier there, but there's certainly been contact at La Source, bodywork lying just off line. We might get away with that. There'll be a yellow flag to warn people of debris. Contact with car 132 in turn 1 noted. So car 132 has been involved in some scrape at La Source. Now, with whom we know not, but 132 is the Carl Washington, James Safronas, Jeroen Bleekemolen and Patrick Long Porsche, the American entry that we were looking at in the pit lane earlier on. So there is Augusto Farfus and Valentino Rossi's BMW. The session has got 8.5 minutes to go. We're almost at the halfway point. And within this element, it is Christopher Hauser who is now the fastest, 2:28.275.
And looking at the cars coming up into Les Combes at the top of the circuit, the rain seemingly is following the racetrack. It was really up at La Source, the pit straight La Source down to Eau Rouge. Up into Les Combes looked like there was enough rain falling to make drivers concerned. So whether we will see anybody improving, 51, the Ferrari's gone quickest. Alessio Rivera, 2:23.0. Wow, 1.2 seconds quicker than the 81 Audi of Aaron. Well, it's all changing in the blink of an eye. Somebody's going slowly. Are they in trouble, or
look at
is that the damaged car?
Yeah, so that's partly what's happened at La Source, where we'd heard about 132 Porsche being in contact. So the car limping back as their Augusto Farfus has an on-track battle with the Boots and Audi of Adam Ateki, the Porsche keeping out of the way. But that's been a huge amount of damage to that. Let's have a look and see if we can piece it. Oh, he gets into the back of the Lamborghini. Blimey.
He did a lot of damage to the left front. Certainly bodywork, no doubt, probably the radiator also, because that's a very vulnerable part of the front end of the Porsche. So Rivera's done, I mean, that's a pretty impressive time in these mixed conditions, 2:23.095, still that 1.2 second advantage over Aaron on the Mercedes in second place, and then Cesar Gazou in the Audi and Christopher Hauser third and fourth, but their times are considerably slower than the quickest two cars are, and already the field's making its way back in. So whether some of these drivers took the chance, I mean, a 2:23.095 and a set of wet tires, I would say is pretty mighty, but equally if they'd been brave and tried to they got the temperature, but everybody's piling in,
Yeah.
more or less anyway.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, it's become very, very busy all of a sudden. Whether people were anticipating with a slow car and bodywork the session might be interrupted, or whether they just feel that there's no point staying out because we can't go any quicker. Alessio Rovera, the fastest anyway in the Ferrari, 2:23.095. And that, when I say fastest, I mean fastest in Q2, not the fastest overall.
So waiting to see whether WRT are going to, well, they're coming up, a set of wets coming off, and looks like a set of slicks. So
is this why people are bailing?
yeah, I mean, because the time that Rovera has set in the Ferrari, I mean, if that was a wet weather time, it would be unbelievably quick. It had to be set in a set of slicks in mixed and difficult conditions. But the pit lane has read the story on the timing and scoring screen that now, even though the track conditions are not absolutely ideal for a set of slicks, it's the quicker way, but you have to stay online, not be over ambitious with the use of curbs. And talk about curbs, we're coming through the Paul Frere curb. That was a bit of a pony. And look at this, Andrea Caldarelli. What a star he has been through his Lamborghini history. Up the hill into Blanchimont, and couldn't really tell whether he had a little sort of racing driver. Well, it was flat out, it was flat out. Well, look at the telemetry. You did breathe it actually, but no, I was flat. But certainly flat over the curbs, took a big bunch of curb coming into the chicane, confident enough to run the curb on the exit. So what is Andrea Caldarelli going to serve us up?
Well, he's onto a flying lap now, isn't he? That order that you've got on the graphic, that is the combined, that's the average. So taking this and Q1 into account. So it is number 10 now, Cesar Gauzot at the wheel of it, who is second in Q2, but that car is fastest on the average. Alessio Rovera, that 2:23.095, and indeed Gauzot's 2:23.4. I think they must be on slicks already to have done that, but others are following suit.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the time was definitely set on a set of slicks, but watch. Look at that, 1.9 seconds under. I mean, that's a phenomenal. Currently, this car in this session is third. If he can maintain that level of advantage, and he looks like he's got good performance from the car is working for him, and he can run the curbs on the exit from Fagnes, then gets those in a little bit wash out down to the bottom of the racetrack, but still sufficient momentum carried through Paul Frere curve, and then it'll be this last sector coming up, the climb up into the chicane.
Big climb over the curb there. Look for the Christopher Hauser Audi. That car was quick early on. We're keeping an eye to Ralph Aaron in the Mercedes, who's got good pace. Christopher Hauser goes up to fourth fastest now within the session, and indeed on the average. Sam Neary, I was about to say, was third in the car that was quickest in Q1, but it's now dropped to fourth because Dan Harper's gone better. This is Ralph Aaron in the Mercedes up towards the line. Absolute best sector 1, down in sector 2. Let's see what he can do at the end of the lap. 38th on the average, as now up to the top of the times has gone Sam Neary, and Ralph Aaron goes through. He's fastest in the session, but not yet on the average. So Ralph Aaron, 2:22.434. That's the best time in Q2.
That's a very good time again on these difficult conditions. Lights fading, you're relying on your headlights to pick up, and there's always, this time of night it's not fully dark, but there's still enough light around to be able to read what the track surface is going to give you. But that's a very strong lap, 2 minutes 22.4 in these conditions. If rain doesn't fall, there's no further rain, in other words, this track is going to get really quick for qualifying 3 and 4, and that's going to be a lot of fun, because what happened in Q1 is going to have a long effect all the way through to the end of Q4.
What I just said about Sam Neary going quickly, scratch that, because he's had his lap time taken away for track limit offences. So the timing tower that you're looking at is shuffling, partly because of people's pace, but also because lap times that have been set have disappeared. Ralph Aaron was way up the curb there. That was marginal.
Yeah, but I mean, again, he's got purple in sector 1. Just by the way, Andrea Caldarelli, who we were watching just a moment or so ago, he is third quickest overall in Q2, but it is that car's position. You have to check down through timing and scoring to see where it is. Well, can't see it off the top of it. Well, it would be fourth. So that's they'll be comfortable with that. Yeah. But what Aaron is doing, I mean, he has been quick ever since he started this session. He's got sector 1 purple. That's the fastest of anybody right now. It runs very wide. Ooh, that was maybe a bit too wide. Might have had to check up on just, you can see he lost that little bit of time in sector 2 down by 0.8 of a second on doing all the good work he did in Sector 1. So watching Raffaele Marcello on timing and scoring, got personal bests in Sector 1 and 2. So maybe Marcello will challenge what Aaron has done. It may not be green, it may not be purple, 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 but 3 greens is a pretty good score as well. There we are on board Marcello, trying to get around one of the slower cars. That'll have had a bearing on his overall lap time.
So he goes second fastest then, and that was a 2:22.922, puts him up to third on the average now. Ralph Aaron still quick, he's up to second fastest, as now Clemens Schmidt in the 85 Lamborghini goes to the very top in Q2, and that puts them third on the average. Ralph Aaron's problem is that the car didn't do a very good time in Q1, and however quickly he's going, he can't make up for that on the average.
But I tell you what, he's doing a very good job and trying the best he can. Cesar Gazou in just looking down, Cesar Gazou.
Whoops, getting it wrong at the chicane.
Yeah, that's on, I mean, all the time that he'd been building in that lap. So he personal best in the Audi. So where will that end up? Will they lose that? They go quickest overall. As Ricardo Feller behind him.
So Gazzo goes second overall. Ricardo Feller up to the top of the times, 2:20.509. He's over a second quicker than anybody else now, Ricardo Feller. This is Marciello, and it's all busy ahead. So Marciello did an absolute best in the first sector, a purple time, but then got in traffic again. So he's running out. In fact, this is his last lap. The flag is out. So Marciello, I'm afraid, looks like he's going to catch traffic in Pouhon. Goes to the outside line. He's up the curb. Whoa, that was close.
I like that one for the Christmas video, because to go around the outside and Pouhon, that takes commitment, skill, and a lot of faith in the car you're going around the outside of. But he is on a mission. You've got a green sector.
Q3 will start at 22:10.
That's the voice of Alain Adon, the race director. This is the AF Corsa Ferrari that he was caught up behind. I think it was 52, wasn't it? Yes. So he was delayed out of Les Combes down towards Bruxelles, and once an opportunity presented, bang, through he went. But we're talking thousandths of a second here, so a big chunk of time was lost. Marvin Kirchhofer up to second in Q2. Ricardo Feller's 2:20.509. Now this is Joel Sturm, former GT4 racer, looking good in the Pure Racing 911. But again, he's got traffic around him. Sandy Mitchell up to second fastest now in the K-Pax Lamborghini, 2:21.359. So Feller, Mitchell, Kirchhofer, Clemens Schmidt, Aaron, and then Julian Andlauer for the Manthey Porsche team up to sixth, and that means that Andlauer is the quickest of the IGTC registered drivers, ahead of Thomas Preining and then Raffaele Marciello.
I mean, the racetrack is drying by the corner, by the second, and I mean, the time that the quickest Porsche in this session, well, the quickest Audi is actually 2 minutes 20.5, and that's an excellent effort. Round the outside into the chicane, you're going to be compromised, but gets away with it. And the DK Engineering back Mercedes just was simply outmaneuvered. So Sturm comes across the line.
And goes fastest over across the line, but then Julian Andlauer is even faster still, 2:20.441. So Julian Andlauer is now the fastest, and that's the only time the car has done, except Joel Sturm's time is now confirmed, and a 2:20.211 puts him to the top on the average now. So, still with me, Julian Andlauer is quickest in Q2, but of the average of 2 times, Joel Sturm's car, 911, is back to the top. It was well up with Alex Malikin at the wheel, so it's looking good for Porsche all of a sudden. 1-2 on the average.
So it's Porsche, Audi, Mercedes, Lamborghini, Porsche, and then the first of the McLarens, and the session is all over, and track conditions have stabilized, so other than something unforeseen happening, everybody will start Q3 on a brand new set of slicks, and one would hope that in the time between these cars coming in and going back out on track, the track will marginally improve, just simply any damp patches might disappear.
So this is how we stand so far on the combined classification, taking the average of Q1 and Q2. Malikin and Sturm's effort put them at the top, ahead of Julian Andlauer. Ricardo Feller third. Then Loris Cabirou and Cesar Gazou's times put them fourth. Mauro Engel is fifth, ahead of Thomas Laurent and Adam Matecki. Down to seventh has slipped Fabrizio Crestani's car, Sam Neri having done that last part of qualifying. Sandy Mitchell 8 from Antares out and Tim Heinemann, with Marvin Kirchhofer rounding out the top 10. Then you've got Christopher Mies ahead of Clemens Schmidt. Sam Dehaan and Tom Gamble combined 13th ahead of Baptiste Moulin and then Artem Petrov. Dorian Pan and Rahal Frey 15th from Raffaele Marciello, from Thomas Preining, from Dan Harper, Augusto Farfus, and then 20th is Ayhan Guven, and you can see that the rain is falling heavily once more. Looking further down the order, there you can see who is doing what in the 31st to 60th times. Just picking out one or two of the cars that you might have anticipated to be a little bit higher up. Stephen and Brenton Grove were going well early on in that session, but then sort of fell away late on. Jean-Baptiste Simonauer in the repaired number 30 BMW that had a big off in free practice, 41st. Lucas Auer, 37th. And now a time has been done by Ollie Milroy to get number 7 moving, as it were. But Frank Roeder and Frederick Schandorf also need to have a go in that car to help propel it up the order after Brendan Arive didn't get a time in with his puncture.
So, what can you do? You've seen as conditions improve in Q2. Now, heaven's open again, and it'll be wet weather tyres. That'll be, I think, the de facto choice. Now, where that image was taken of the rain falling may not be all around the racetrack. When we're seeing an isolated area where the cameras picked up the rainfall, it doesn't look in the pit lane as if it's raining, or if it is, it's not as heavy as, well, actually, you can just about see it in the top right-hand corner. You can just see that the rain is relatively heavy. So back into the pits. I suppose this is part of what 24-hour racing is all about. And Spa in particular, where you've got this unpredictability of what is going to come out of the heavens.
So we're about a minute and a half or so away from the next session getting underway, and you can see it is very nearly 10 past 10 local time. So this is Q3 coming up. You know what the format is now, different driver. You can't refuel, so the cars get lighter and lighter as the evening goes on, and therefore in Q4 they are at their lightest and in theory their fastest. As for number 92 now, Julian Andlau gives way, and Kevin Estre is nominated as driver 2. This will be worth watching, won't it?
Wet weather tyres for Rev and Kevin, and the team not going to flirt with going out and doing an exploratory lap on a set of dry weather slicks. The decision has been made by the team. The risk is too great. It's easier to go out on wets and say, oh, we're overly cautious, and come back in and put on a set of slicks. But to go out on a set of slicks in these circumstances, well, that's a big roll of the dice.
Nick Yellerly, Monza winner in the opening round of the Fanatec GT Europe Championship. He's ready to go. And you can see how much wetter the pit lane has got. You can also detect how much wetter our cameraman has got from what's fallen on the lens. Right, so the Grello Porsche goes down the pit lane. There is number 20 getting set to venture out, and slicks being replaced by the wet tyres before that car takes to the circuit.
Why is that mechanic holding a set of slicks, or one slick? Is it just sort of wishful hoping?
That's the Max Hesse-driven BMW, the second of the Rover Racing cars. Of course, big BMW presence this year. Lots of Porsches as well. Number 56 drops down, ready to go. The Adrian Delina, Daniele Diamato, now Tanat Satarin-Tirocool, the Thai driver-driven Porsche. Session is live, track is wet. That is, for me, one of the most magical shots about this race. All the headlights streaming up Eau Rouge, the pits illuminated, and it's just going to get busier and busier and busier.
From the comfort of a commentary booth.
True, but it is quite a good place to go and sit in this huge grandstand that was built last year. Right, in the pit lane, I'm linked getting ready to send out Mirko Bortolotti. That will be worth watching as well. We know how good Mirko is.
Oh, yes.
It really is, I know I'll say it every year, but it is another absolutely stellar lineup that we have for this year's CrowdStrike 24 Hours of Spa, the 75th running of this event.
Interesting to see in Q3 if the amount of rain that's fallen between the end of 2 and beginning of 3, whether that's going to cause a spray issue. I mean, we've not seen people struggling with spray in the back end of Q1, and there wasn't much in Q2. This could be the first time drivers having not only to deal with wet track, but having to deal with restricted visibility.
So cars on track. It'll take them a lap or two to get tyres up to temperature and also find some clear track space. So 69 cars competing in qualifying. We've lost for the moment 75 Mercedes, which of course was damaged earlier on in the day. Julien Andlauer topped the times in Q2, and Gemma Scott has been able to find him.
Julien, that was quite exciting, watching the positions changing constantly throughout that session, and I find it interesting now that you've come in off slicks and wets have gone onto the car, right?
Yeah, it was pretty exciting for us as well, but quite tough, I have to say, because it's really difficult to get the right call between the engineer and us, what we see on track, what they see also on the lap times, and the others on all the tires. So they made the right choice. I let them do it, and they just told me to box and to go for the slicks. We got a shot on the lap, in the last lap, and now very happy with this. I think the car was fantastic. Also from free practice 1 to now, we made huge steps, and it finally pays off a little bit, but now it's quite tough overall. In the in-lap, it was raining a bit more, so I tried to give as much details and information to the team and to Lawrence to jump in the car, and at least this is done. The car is still in one piece. It was a couple of corners where it was a bit tricky, but yeah, we made it. P1 is great, but to be in the top 20 gonna be more important.
Congratulations, great session. Thank you.
Thank you.
Julien Andlauer, double Carrera Cup champion, one title in France, one in Germany. He won the Dubai 24 Hours 2 years ago, so he knows what he's doing in Porsches, knows what he's doing in long distance races. I think we said Kevin Estre was getting into the car, but from what has just been said, sounds like Laurens Vanthoor instead is going to do this element of qualifying. So we'll double check in a moment. I think it is Laurens Vanthoor actually, yes, on the rotation that was nominated. Mathieu Drudy coming up Raidillon.
Oh, he was way wide coming out of the top of Raidillon.
Yeah, it was, wasn't it?
Well, I think 4 wheels virtually off the racetrack, did well to keep the car from getting away from him.
Now, Marco Seefried has taken over 9-11. It was Joel Sturm that put the car to the top of the times, and Joel is with Amanda Busick.
Well, the Porsche originally had slicks on it when we got over here. The rain has picked up significantly. They went out on wet tires, and Joel, you led that effort to put that team best overall so far. What did you tell Marco before he went out?
Yeah, I told him the track is quite dry, but as you can see, it changed again, and we're now again out on wet. So my advice was basically nothing worth. I hope he's just getting onto grips and making a good lap. That's all you can do now.
Thank you.
Right, so drivers here. Dare one say it looks wetter than it did when it first rained, actually.
Oh, I think
the
rain is more uniform over the entire circuit, and you can see the rain's coming in. It's not quite horizontal, but
there's your spray.
Oh yeah, the spray's coming off. And the track is now fully wet, and it's these conditions where the wet weather tire really understands what it's there to do. But of course, lap times are going to drop away. I mean, we've seen in that Q2 a qualifying lap 2:21. We're going to see times probably now on that. Where's that?
That's in the pit lane, isn't it? That's the Marco Bortolotti Lamborghini that has not yet gone out. So they've got a problem with 63. Mathieu Drudy has got problems in as much as he's in traffic. Circuit or somewhere a bit shorter like Monza, for example. So a 2:38 is the initial time offered up by Alex Fontana for Porsche, and that's therefore 20 seconds off what we had in the dry in Q1.
That would be, in effect, that was his first flying lap. So whether there's any scope, but you can see again the spray that's coming as the lowest part of the racetrack, and that's now, you know, genuinely rooster tails, which says this is a full wet racetrack. And what you'd have to think about now is, well, the track is fully wet, but will there be any surprises? Whereas you might find a bit of standing water if the rain continues to fall at the level it is. It doesn't take an awful lot, and visibility now is very difficult once you're in the spray.
Charlie Fagg is behind the wheel of the McLaren here that's paddling its way around the outside quite courageously into the chicane, and this car then accelerates up towards the timing line. So Charlie Fagg about to break the beam and see what he can offer up as he goes through. But for the moment, the best time is that of number 96. There's a question mark over the transponder of that car. I'll come back to it in a second. Mikael Grenier is now the fastest in Q3. 2:37 is where we are in terms of the time.
Yeah, it's the Porsche 96. Likewise, it's got a purple sector. That's the Rutronic Racing Porsche, so that's something to keep an eye on. 42.5, fractionally quicker than that Grenier has done. Grenier is the quickest car currently in Q3, so whether Heinrich can maintain that pace, whether he gets himself bogged down in traffic. Maxime Martin, the 46 BMW, and this group of cars still waiting to see where that car is going to end up. So it comes across the line.
Maxime Martin goes second in Q3, 2:38.2. But it's busy, and to go back to a point John was making earlier on in the evening, the light has gone very, very quickly. It's all but disappeared. 96 then, Larin Heinrich at the wheel. This car's down to fourth now. Neil Verhagen has just got up to second, ahead of the Argentine driver Nico Varrone. And then all of that is eclipsed by David Schumacher, who's gone to the top of the times then. So 2:37.448 for Ralf Schumacher's son. That's a good effort.
Good effort for David Schumacher, indeed. These are difficult circumstances. David is a single-seater driver, but a young driver hasn't got that much experience in driving a GT3 car on a road circuit like Spa in these conditions in darkness.
So that's the Rutronic Porsche. Way up the curb, Larin Heinrich heading up towards the end of a lap. And Alex Fontana has gone back to the top of the times now on a 2:36.8. So the times are dipping a little bit. We've only got 6.5 minutes of this session to go. And Heinrich goes quickest now, 2:36.098. So I'm not suggesting the road is drying, but certainly the confidence level is going up for drivers and they are able to push. But there you can see how wet it is down at the Cours Paul Frere.
Yeah, I mean, Heinrich used a lot of the curb on the entry into the chicane, so he's got that confidence to be able to do that. Normally running curbs in wet conditions is a bit of a no-no because the grip level between the curb and the racetrack is different, but he used it and he gained the benefit. Okay, he's almost just over half a second quicker than second place now in this session, Laurens Vanthoor. Porsche, top 4 Q3 as we stand in this session.
So Grenier comes up towards the timing line, and Charlie Fagg has gone fastest, 2:35.645 for McLaren. Really, really good effort that, to be 4 tenths quicker than anybody else. Robert Schwarzman then goes second, 22 thousandths shy, 2:35.667. Mikael Grenier is next, ahead of Larin Heinrich, Laurens Vanthoor and Alex Fontana.
Again, it's just a situation of, as cars come across start-finish line, assuming they're in clear air, they are improving. So every lap that the driver is doing, he's gaining more feel, more confidence. He's enabling himself to push that little bit harder, particularly coming through the exit at the top of Radio, and then all the way, the benefit you gain is all the way up the hill, up the Kemmel Straight. So if you can get speed through Eau Rouge and over Radio, it pays a big dividend by the time you get up to brake coming into Lake Coombe.
Through which you turn right, then left, then right again, and about here, finally, the road starts to drop away because that climb just keeps on climbing. It's a really, really steep run up through Raidillon, but then you carry on with a rather more gradual climb all the way to the exit of Les Combes, out of Bruxelles, and this is where it starts to plunge downhill then towards Speaker's Corner, which was catching people out earlier on. Interesting, isn't it, that in dry conditions with good light, we had a number of incidents causing red flags there earlier on in pre-qualifying. In the wet and in the dark, no one's been off the road yet.
David, hold your
I did say yet, yes.
No, but everybody is primed for much, much more difficult situations. So what they're doing is driving within the margins of the racetrack and driving within their own limits. They're not extending those limits on a perfectly dry racetrack, thinking they might get away with it, but on board with the Ferrari. And again, just watch the hand movements. You don't want to have too many abrupt movements. Turns in, down the bottom of the racetrack, having to make minute little corrections, then just runs against the curb, then into Paul Frere Coombe. Watch the hand movement again. Just imperceptible little moves up and down on the steering wheel. Now momentarily you've got to catch your breath, but there's a car up ahead. In fact, look at the headlights. There's 2 cars directly ahead of, and your focus is going to be, where am I going to catch? And always the danger of catching a car in a ball of spray. Blue light flashing up the road. What's that for? I can't make out.
That's a blue flag, effectively, isn't it?
Blue light. Yeah, get out of the way. Now there's the problem. 2 cars directly ahead, and he splits them, but this cost him time. So again, the frustration.
I mean, he had done an absolute best in the middle sector on that lap. So as he goes across the line, Robert Schwarzman's lap is slower, as you say, because he encountered the traffic in the end of the lap. Right, so this now is Charlie Fagg's view. And he is the fastest at the moment by those 22 thousandths of a second. So this is brave stuff up the hill.
Wow, is that ever brave? Oh, dear me. Oh, wow. That last bit of opposite lock as he clipped the curb on the top of radio. Well, talk about heart and mouth. I don't think he even had time to have his heart in his mouth. That was such a quick snap oversteer. The back of the car just almost got away from Charlie Fagg, but he got it in control. And he's forgotten about it. He's now got other challenges up in Les Combes. And again, the track, the surface, this is a different level of grip to where he was 1 lap ago. This car currently second. Maxime Martin in the 46 BMW. That's the Valentino Rossi BMW. Fastest overall by just over 1/10 of a second from Charlie Fagg, who we're riding with. Comes down into Bruxelles again, having to oversteer, understeer, correct lift off, dab, brakes. Check the speed, don't run in too quickly. You've got 2 minutes of the session remaining.
A lot of effort, a lot of energy being put into this lap by Charlie Fagg. So the young Brit accelerates out of Pouhon. And Maxime Martin has now eclipsed him. He has gone fastest. Maxime Martin, 2:35.511. But it's still a good lap, this by Charlie Fagg.
So out of Fagnes. And watch, this is where it's easy. He didn't make the apex, but maybe because the sense is that there's actually slightly more grip off the racing line at that part of the racetrack. And that's in these conditions, drivers often take lines. You think, well, what's he doing way offline, going a long way around a corner, when clearly the shorter way through is to take the racing line. Well, the reason you do it is because the driver has discovered there's actually a lot more grip on the non-racing line part of the racetrack into Blanchimont. Well, he gets through there cleanly and without any heart attack moments. And now I'm into the braking zone, coming into the chicane. So I don't know whether this lap is not looking at time and scoring. So he's got yellows in each of the sectors. So he's into the pit lane. He's decided that's me done. 42 seconds of the session remaining.
Just to go back to something else we were looking at the start of Q3, Mirko Bortolotti in the pit lane. Apparently at the end of Q2 there was a coming together between BMW 32, that's the Charles Weerts car, and 63 when Andrea Caldarelli was at the wheel. So effectively they're repairing some damage that was sustained at the end of Q2. That's why the car hadn't gone out. Right, flag is imminent, as you can see. 17 seconds are on the clock as the Audi challenge continues. But Maxime Martin then using local knowledge to an extent. 2:35.511 is the quickest in Q3, but it's still 9:11. Marco Seefried, 9th in Q3, make that now 10th in Q3, but he's still the top on the average. And it's changed again because up to 4th now in Q3 has gone Laurens Vanthoor in the Manthey Porsche.
Yeah, and that time was set just a moment ago towards the conclusion of Q3. So again, a good run by the local. Can you call Laurens Vanthoor a local boy? He's not. So. He's not from Spa.
No.
Sort of the community, but he's a Belgian driver. He's a Belgian racing hero.
Right, Gilles Magnus, another Belgian driver, accelerates on, and this car currently is to be found in 21st place in the session, make that 22nd in the session because others are going faster and faster and faster. So through the spray, through the rain, flag is out, and Gilles Magnus then heads towards the timing line. Looks good though, green and green.
Yep, he got personal best first and second sector. So that will elevate that car. Waiting to see him coming across the line. Goes 2:36, so it puts him to, well, 21st, according to that. But 12.
Q4 will start at 22:32.
Says the race director. Right, Gilles Magnus was 9th in Q3, the session we've just seen, and 23rd, that car being shown, I think, I'm right in saying, on the average.
If I'm not mistaken, Robert Schwartzman has just done a purple Sector 2.
He has.
I mean, in conditions which are deteriorating. So his first sector was no improvement. Second sector, there we go. Speak of the Schwartzman.
Well, he's going well and heads now towards the timing line. So number 51 up towards the checkered flag. And what does the lap do? First of all, in Q3, goes fastest to 2:35.120 then by 0.3 of a second over Maxime Martin. We'll confirm when we can whether that puts him on the average, but a great effort that by Robert Schwartzman.
I mean, in conditions that have deteriorated by the minute, that I think is a stellar lap. I mean, I just can't imagine what it was like driving, because these conditions are extremely testing, and to do a time quicker than anybody else at the end of the session, I'm impressed, and no wonder Ferrari's impressed with this young man.
Very impressive indeed. Marco Wittmann is still out there as well. The average lap time the car's got is a 2:29.375. This is the Rover Racing entry coming up through Pouhon. Flag is out, as you can see. The majority of people have now taken it. I'm just wondering whether Marco Wittmann has. Yes, he has. This is an in lap for Wittmann, so he's done.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm trying to factor what Schwartzman did, or what a team might have made a change to enable Schwartzman to drive at that level of 1:35.1. It's almost 0.4 of a second quicker than Maxime Martin, whose time we were lauding in the 46 BMW. So Schwartzman has really, I think, changed the level of benchmark. And whether these conditions are going to now plateau out, or whether they're going to continue to get worse and worse for Q4. Anyway, going back to our shootout tomorrow, David, it's going to be an interesting top 20.
Well, it is at the moment.
From what we've got at the minute, yeah.
Yeah. We've got one more 15-minute segment that could just shuffle things a little. Now, we were touching earlier on Andrea Caldarelli's Lamborghini with problems. Gemma can find out more for us.
Andrea, this is a really tough time now. What's happened?
Yeah, during my last lap, an Audi in front of me spun at turn 15. I avoided, and it's a blind corner. I think a BMW from WRT hit me from the back. It was coming quite quick, and there is something, I think something wrong with the power steering. That the guys, they're trying to fix it. I don't know what to say really. It was a crazy session. Obviously the condition, they didn't help, but I would just say this time really unlucky.
Hope they can get it back out. Thanks a lot, Andrea.
Well, there are 24 hours in which to recover from a bad grid position, and lots of the pro cars are going to be in the same boat, because all of their lap times are going to be from the wet, whereas at least the four-driver cars, many of them at least, had a good or a half-decent dry time at the very start. So some of those pro cars are always going to be down the order.
Yes, it's it's frustrating for the pro teams, because they're the ones that have effectively lost the most in these changing conditions. But it certainly will, I believe, create an extremely amusing and interesting grid for the Superpole tomorrow afternoon. Assuming, it could be like this tomorrow. We're assuming it's going to be sunshine, just everywhere. But look at it.
Welcome to Spa. So this is how we stand with the combined classification. Now we've got 3 average times to factor in, and still Alex Malikian, Joel Sturm, Marco Seefried, the fastest, because the car was so good in that dry element at the start of the evening. Sam Dehaan, Tom Gamble, and now Charlie Fagg are up to second, ahead of Thomas Laurent, Adam Eteki, and Aurélien Panis. Then it's Antares Zhao, Tim Heinemann, and Janis Fitje up to fourth, ahead of Dorian Pain, Rahal Frey, and Sarah Bovy. Fabrizio Crestani, quickest in Q1, next, and with 69 cars taking to the circuit. It is still very wet, very busy, and the order is far from resolved. As we get set for Q4 then here in this CrowdStrike 24 Hours of Spa, and we are about 40 seconds, I think, away from the green light coming on at the end of the pit lane. So it's going to be a really interesting 20 that go into Superpole, that's for sure.
Big problem for me will be the amount of water now on the racetrack, which will lead to visibility problems, possibility also in certain parts of the track where you'll get little rivulets running across diagonally against the flow of traffic. So the possibility of aquaplaning, I'll tell you what, the guys that are going to go out in Q4, they're going to earn their position in the teams throughout the field.
And it's conditions like this, fast forward to the race, that will test everybody in the pit lane, mechanics, strategists, everybody, to try and second guess what the conditions are doing. We're in business then, Q4 underway. So everybody paddles out. Remember, the cars have been on the circuit before, but not these drivers. So as each driver leaves the pit lane, they suddenly discover what the track surface is like.
And as was mentioned in an earlier interview, I think it might have been Rivera or Crestani, none of the pro drivers have driven in these conditions until now, this weekend. On the bronze test, I think, from what I understood, there was some wet weather running, but there's wet weather running and there's running in these conditions. Now, what is going on with the headlight flashing like that on the Lamborghini coming in? Can you explain that, coming into the pits with one headlight flashing, or is it, I can't make out what it is.
Let's have a look from the front.
It's like a giant hazard warning light.
Is that because it's on the pit lane speed limit?
Don't know.
And that's something that goes with that, maybe.
Don't know.
Right, so we've got a big chunk of the order with 30-something cars having a dry time. So half the field on those dry tyres with a much, much better lap time in the offing for when we get to the final average, especially as it's getting wetter and wetter and slower. Right, now does this show us the spinning Audi? There is the spin. Caldarelli slows to avoid it, and
he gets a whack up the back.
Yeah, a big biff in the rear. You're
so
right.
Caldarelli basically backed off to let the Audi spin. When a car spins, you don't actually try to avoid it. You want to actually aim for the car, because by the time you get to where the car that's spinning is, it's moved on and you get through. But if you try and anticipate where it might go, inevitably you end up catching it.
So you can see the scuff marks on the back, but it looks as though they have got the car ready to go.
But is it pointing, are all wheels pointing in the right direction? Has there been damage that has not been corrected? That'll only be determined when this car goes out and the first opportunity to do a flying lap has been established.
So the circuit wetter than it has been all day. This is about the first proper rain that Spa's had in 5 weeks, we understand. So it's been a very dry period, but not tonight, it's not. So with the clock ticking on down, 12 minutes of qualifying remain. I think we are heading, given how many of the cars from bronze and from silver and gold and Pro-Am went out in the dry, to an unprecedented order for Superpole.
So Klaus Bachler absolutely flat out down the hill. Can he get through a rouge and keep the car pointing in the direction at the exit that it entered into that sequence of corners? And he's done so. So Klaus Bachler is on his way. So he is somebody who, in a Porsche in these conditions, David, as you've pointed out on innumerable occasions, is an impressive bit of kit. Indeed.
Number 3 Mercedes, Patrick Assenheimer at the wheel, has been given the mechanical warning flag and he's coming back into the pit lane. That could be something like the lights not working. Jules Gounon, though, goes purple.
It had been Bachler for a millisecond, and then Gounon went and trumped him by about 0.2 of a second. So Gounon in the 88 Mercedes, pick him up there. Still Klaus Bachler at the Porsche as we ride. Can't work out who we're riding with. It's supposed to be Klaus Bachler.
I was going to say Gounon because it sounds Mercedes-ish, that, more than Porsche-ish to me.
Could be. I think you're right.
There you go.
It is the 88, all the 8s.
So, Jules Gounon, last year's winner, and in fact the other time on the board, Daniel Juncadella, is the third member of last year's winning crew. He's in a different car this year, but the third man, as it were, with Gounon and Marciello, is on the grid this year as well. So it doesn't seem to matter what time of year, whether it's early July or mid-October like it was a couple of years ago, Spa and weather, always as fickle as can be. Got another absolute best in the first sector, Dennis Marshall's Audi now. And 10 minutes of qualifying to go.
So we're just waiting for these cars to come up and complete the first blind lap. Bachler's got the fastest overall time momentarily in Sector 2, and Gounon this time doesn't trump him, but somebody else has. Somebody else has gone quickest in Sector 2, and I'm looking down to see timing and scoring. It is Caroli in another Porsche. Matteo Caroli has gone quickest in Sector 2, but now coming up to the conclusion, this will be the first flying lap by any of these group of driver cars in Q4. So what will Bachler set the benchmark? He's the first car to come across the line to complete a flying lap.
Right, so Klaus Bachler goes through, 2:37.078. Robert Renard goes second, and Jules Gounon breaks the beam to go third on a 2:38.521, make that fourth, because Maxi Goetz Mercedes goes up to second. Matteo Cairoli tops the times in the 36s now.
So it's Porsche, Mercedes, Audi, Mercedes, Porsche, Mercedes, the top 7. And Charles Weerts has jumped up to 8th, but he's been trumped. Dennis Linder's just gotten ahead of him in the Lamborghini, so it is changing. Almost Nicky Thiem in 10th place in the Audi. Dean McDonald 11th in the McLaren. Finlay Hutchinson in 12th. He was 12th, he's now 13th. And just literally, I can't get them out quick enough before the timing and scoring is changing.
So every car that crosses the line shuffles the order. There are more to come, look, because they've only got 21 times. So the field comes pouring its way through. Matteo Cairoli from Klaus Bachler, the 2 Porsches. Dennis Marshall goes third in the Audi.
That's Maxi Goetz is the man on the charge right now. Sector 1, purple. No, he's been trumped. Dennis Marshall in the Audi has now gone fastest overall in Sector 1. By about a 10th or just under a 10th of a second. And these are tough conditions. It's dark, it's a wet track, it's deteriorating by the lap. You've got to deal with the spray of cars around you. You've got to deal with cars that are on the way in. You've got cars that are going out to begin a lap.
But isn't that what makes Spa so special? What makes it so difficult to win? What makes it so rewarding and satisfying to win? Because it is a tough event, this.
I have to say, David, in all my years of racing, it wasn't as hard as this when I was racing at Kyrgyzstan. For all the fans back in my home country and that wonderful little racetrack in County Down.
I've still never been. I need to put that right one day. So, what have we got left in the session? 7 3/4 minutes, and it is Cairoli from Bachler, Marshall, Goetz, Renard, and Dennis Marshall, as we've been saying, fastest in Sector 1, but now Jules Gounon, fastest and an absolute best in Sector 2. Make that Matteo Cairoli, because he has gone even faster than Gounon.
It's just going to change. And, I mean, that looks all a bit ippy. You've got to be so aware of where the water stands, and under braking, does Gounon get it in? He does. Manages to make the transition from right back to left, straighten the car up as early as you possibly can. Don't let wheel spin take over, traction control kicks in. So Gounon fastest in Sector 3 and goes fastest overall in the Session 1. So 2:35.919. Cairoli has beaten him in the space of me saying that, 2:35.649.
And the absolute best middle sector time, Kevin Estre in number 92 Porsche. So Matteo Cairoli is at the top, and another absolute best in Sector 1 has come from Fred Verviche, but 92 Porsche of Kevin Estre has now gone quicker than anybody in the middle sector of the lap.
All you BMW fans out there, Charles Weerts is doing his bit, got the car, the 32 BMW M4, up into 4th position. Kevin has done it, David.
Gone fastest, 2:35.182 then, so Kevin Estre tops Q4, but the car is nowhere in the order. It's not going to make Superpole because it has been only able to do... Oh, no, sorry, I'll tell you a lie. It is. It's up to now 5th on the average. I was fearing it wasn't going to get there because it had only ever been able to do wet times, but it is 5th on the average.
Keep an eye on Danny Juncadella, currently 8th overall. The car is 8th overall, but he is on a lap where he is fastest in Sector 1. But you've got Alex Fontana, who just elevated himself up into 7th. So what can Juncadella do in Sector 2 and Sector 3? He could put himself, well, he currently is 8th. The car is 8th in the combined 3 and a bit sessions to date. So Klaus Bachler, Porsche, currently, then McLaren, and then first of the Audis, then Kevin Estre, and then Renauer in his Porsche. 4 Porsches in the top 6. David, didn't you say the Porsche like these wet weather conditions?
I think I might have mentioned that, yes.
Can I repeat that comment? I think you might have said it.
Well, what about Mercedes? Danny Juncadella is currently with an absolute best within the first sector. Kind of saying to people, don't forget about me. You keep going on about Marciello and Gounod, but I won this race last year. Fred Verviche now fastest in Q4 on a 2:34.9 in the Audi. So he's gone a 10th quicker than Estre. So the Audi still is a strong car. And what about Danny Juncadella's lap? He's heading to the end of it.
Last night, Shedloff lost 4/10 of a second. In the middle sector has been a total whitewash or washout or whatever phrase you choose to use. Nicholas Nielsen in the Ferrari, 51, 2:34.864.
He goes quickest in Q4 then by a 10th of a second. So Nielsen, Verviche, Fabian Schiller's Mercedes, treble 7 up to 3rd. I think we said at the start of this the order was going to change every time a car crossed the line, and it continues to do so.
Caroli has now gone quicker than Nielsen, so the top 10 are almost swapping positions literally by the second. He's got just under 2/10 of a second, but Nicky Thiem is now 2nd quickest.
So you're riding with Nicholas Nielsen in the Ferrari then, the new 296 Ferrari AF Corsa run under the title of Francorchamps Motors, creating a famous local team.
Do you know the owner of Curie Francorchamps?
I want to say Jacques Switters.
I think you were right.
Yes.
That's what I was going to say.
Good. There we are agreed on something.
I know that was certainly from the 60s and 50s and 60s when he was one of the chosen independent teams that Commendatore Ferrari honoured by giving him or letting him have current cars.
Yeah. Well, don't forget, Ferrari won the Nürburgring 24 hours. A different type of Ferrari won the Le Mans 24 hours. It would be quite a year if they could win the Spa 24 hours as well. Right now, though, I don't think we have a Ferrari in Superpole, believe it or not. So we'll check when we get the top 20 back on that timing tower. But with only 3 minutes to go, some of these drivers are going to have to dig very, very deep.
So we've only got one purple sector showing. That's Sector 1. Dennis Lin. Surprise, surprise. Presently 8th in Q4, but with that fastest sector in Sector 1, can he consolidate it in the final 2 sectors? It just depends really where he is in terms of traffic around him. Can he keep it neat and tidy or push too hard? And in the meantime, Jules Gounod likewise has gone fastest overall in Sector 2, but his Sector 1 time is not sufficient to give him any significant gain. But you never know. In Sector 3, it might play a blinder.
Now, Nicholas Nielsen's efforts have got Ferrari into Superpole, so we've got that car 11th. Dean McDonald 2nd on the average, and now Dennis Lin, personal best in the middle sector. Jules Gounod's done an absolute best in the middle sector, and across the timing line, I think Nicky Thiem, John had said, had gone 2nd. He's up to 16th on average. Dennis Lin is the next man to watch then, number 78. Will be heading up towards the timing line shortly, and when it gets there, let's see what he can do. That rain's getting heavier and heavier and heavier at the end of the night. Actually, the teams aren't yet done either, are they? Because they've still got the night qualifying, and a red flag is shown with 1:40 to go.
And everybody's got to back out of it.
Yeah, so Lind loses that lap.
Red flag, Q4 will not be resumed.
And there you go. With 1:40 to go, there's a red flag. Qualifying will not be resumed. Now, it could be for the conditions that they've stopped this. It could be that there's a car off. But either way, that's qualifying done.
Yeah, but for those cars that were just literally in the chicane and only 200, 300 meters to cross the line, and the red flag or the red light, you're going to get out of it. You can't go across at full speed because you will be penalised. Dries van Thor mulling over what he's been watching and shakes the head. So that car, the 32, where did it end up in this session?
8th.
Okay.
But as far as the average was concerned, 22nd misses out on Superpole then.
That's a bitter pill.
Yeah. But not for the first time.
No.
Dries Van Thor misses out, because was it last year or the year before they had a problem?
They did.
In qualifying.
Well,
and ended up at the back of the grid.
Yeah,
but anyway,
they
yes.
started at the back of the grid, that's right.
The one consolation, as we suggested earlier on, you've got a long way to go, 24 hours to get back up the order. Also missing out, just, is 46. That was 21st. So unless there's anything lurking in the system that will change the order, that's another car that's just missed out. But hey. So this is off at turn 8. Number 79, we understand, is the reason for the red flag. And 79 is the Haupt Mercedes of Arjun Maini, Sebastian Bode, Hubert Haupt, and Jordan Love. Jordan Love at the wheel of it, the Mark Blundell managed driver. He's okay and out of the car, but the car's off the road. But right, that's the reason for the stoppage. And Raffaele Marciello missed Superpole, but he can offer his thoughts on this. He's with Amanda.
Right before Jules Gounon got in for this last qualifying effort, they were on the outside of Superpole getting in. You said it was going to be Jules' effort that would make it happen. How difficult was that to watch before it sealed the deal?
I mean, we've been, I think, like everyone, a bit unlucky on traffic in my quali. Then Timur did his best. Jules did his best, but I mean, it's a tough condition. We didn't have many lap, a lot of cars on tracks. I mean, it's part of the game.
It was a sigh of relief with the red flag for the 88.
So Raffaele Marciello then walked away, and there is an illustration of how the conditions have changed this evening, and we could be seeing a return of the rain over the next 3 days. Tomorrow is given over to a bit more qualifying, but also to racing and to Superpole, and then of course Saturday is racing into the start of the CrowdStrike 24 Hours of Spa, which starts at 4:30. The race gets underway from that traditional ceremonial starting point. So the Spa 24 Hours, unusual in as much as the start line is in one place, the finish is in another. Well, in a sense, that's not that unusual, because quite often the timing line is in a different place from the start line, but not when it's round a corner. It's significantly far away here. But anyway, it's tradition that dictates that they start down the hill. And Valentino Rossi and Maxime Martin discussed live, just missing out on Superpole.
Valentino, his best lap put him 21st in this session, but Maxime Martin giving him support, knowing what a tough session that has been. You can see just how heavy the rain is falling, and I mean, it's nighttime, spray, whatever.
Well, the teams have got 20 minutes before they send the cars back out. This is the top 20 plus, so 911 Porsche, number 5 the Optimum McLaren. That's a great effort. The Huber Motorsport Porsche goes through. So in other words, you've got bronze, gold, bronze, bronze, gold, bronze, and then an overall car. So the best overall is number 92, Estra, Van Thor and Andlauer. Then another of the bronzes, another overall Audi, Feller, Drudy and Marshall. Pro-Am, 10th, Mardini, Collard, Kuyler and Jean Cadea. 2 more overall class cars. 13th is where you find the best of the silver category cars, the VSR Lamborghini. Then it's Pro, then it's silver again, and 2 more bronzes squeeze in also. The 79 Haupt Mercedes, the number 23 Porsche from Earl Bamber's stable. And therefore the first one to miss the cut is the Team WRT number 46 BMW. So all of these cars, subject to any penalties for anybody, are now with their grid positions set, and we will tomorrow look at that top 20. They get 2 laps, and it's your quicker lap that determines your grid position. Quite often we find people go faster on their first of the 2 runs, but we'll see how things pan out tomorrow. But it's going to be a really jumbled grid. Of course, once the race starts, that grid goes straight out of the window. You get into the race. But look at number 71, 47th on the average. And we said earlier on in the day that could be a potential winning car. Look at Caldarelli, Pepper and Bortolotti, 62nd on the grid. It's going to be a long first few hours to get into contention.
Play the long game, boys. Yeah. Play the long game.
Got no choice, have they? But this is another of the fascinations of the CrowdStrike 24 Hours of Spa. It's all building up to be yet another fantastic edition of what has always given us a lively race, whether it's been sports cars, touring cars or GT cars. Right, Get your snorkel masks ready, everybody, because just look how wet that pit lane is becoming, and the track surface is going to be horrible for night qualifying. For the sake of our cameraman, and also because all you'll see are headlights, we won't bring you night qualifying, but we will bring you Superpole tomorrow.
I forgot about night qualifying. I thought what we've just had might have substituted for the night qualifying.
Yes, quite.
Because it's been dark pretty much for the last 3 sessions. So anyway, there's another hour and a half for everybody to go out. Each driver's got to go out and qualify in these nighttime conditions. And wow, okay, well, that's what it is.
It's a regulation that everybody must do 3 laps in the official night-time session. I mean, okay, if you don't and you are an experienced 24 hours driver, you can appeal to the stewards and you'll probably be okay, but it is within the regulation. So the cars get wetter and wetter and wetter. Everybody else is sheltering, and the session qualifying is at an end. Night practice, to give it its full title, will be the final activity on track, and it could well throw up a few more surprises. So Klaus Bachler's car then topping the times, and he, after a great session, is with Amanda.
Best overall of the night to these guys right entered in. Could you have imagined this as a possibility for this team?
I mean, obviously not. This is clear. I know that the team is really good. Also, our lineup, everything is very good. We worked hard to be competitive, but it's clear that normally overall you have no chance. But I told you before, Spa is always special, and the weather here can be crazy. I mean, look out there, it's raining like hell. And for sure, because of the weather, we came also in this position that we have overall a chance. But anyway, we all 4 drivers did an amazing job. Alex started really well with P3 in his... also Marco, first time driving here, the new car in wet. I mean, maybe for many guys, they did not drive here in wet because the whole weekend was not wet, but still really good job. And we are in P1 now, but also in for Superpole, so I'm really looking forward to tomorrow.
A full team effort, congratulations.
So Klaus Bachler, the fastest at the end of that session. So a good effort done by the Porsche team, and now the fascination begins for Superpole tomorrow. So Porsche tops the times at the end of the day. So it's going to be a really interesting Superpole tomorrow with a really jumbled 20 to set us up, and it promises to be a cracking session. We'll bring that to you at around about 3:30 tomorrow. Right, for now, from all of us at Spa, it's time to go and get dry somewhere. We'll see you tomorrow. Bye for now.